are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Please like and share this video so we can help the podcast grow. And please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. That is at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook and at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter. Links to those will be down in the description below. Oh, guys, I am so excited to be back. It has been a long, painful, horrible few weeks for me. I know I tweeted about this at one point, just kind of giving a brief explanation. But obviously, for those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, I owe you guys a little bit of an explanation. What has been going on with me? Why has there not been a podcast, I should say, in the last couple of weeks? I know I put out that stickball video, which I was hoping a few more people would check it out because Moses is a good friend, and I hope that it continues to grow for him. But either way, other than that, I haven't really posted anything. I do have something that I'm working on in editing right now that's going to be really special for you guys. I haven't announced what it is yet, but it's coming here in the next week or so. So I owe you an explanation as to why there has not been any kind of podcast stuff going on. Basically, over the last month. Ever since the mock draft, I've pretty much been silent because, just so you guys know, that video of the stickball tournament stuff, the Kings of the South tournament, was recorded probably about 2 weeks before, maybe even 3 before I ended up posting it, just because of the illness and everything. And there you go. It's kind of spoiling the ending there. But yeah, the reason why I have not been able to do a podcast over the last few weeks is because I got pretty sick. So luckily, this was not like a few months ago where there was 3 weeks without a podcast and it was because I got into a very bad car accident. That is not the case this time. I got very, very sick. And unfortunately, the sickness, so here's kind of the time frame as to how it happened. On that day that I recorded the mock draft, it was a Monday. The Monday before the draft. So that would have been, what's that, April 23rd or something like that I recorded that mock draft. It was something like that. And then when I was wrapping up that podcast or that mock draft, I started noticing that my throat was getting a little sore, and I figured that it was just probably because I've been talking for the last, hour or so, and getting pretty animated and trying to figure it out. And up to that point, I hadn't done a whole lot of long records in a while. I figured, hey, maybe my throat's just getting a little sore. I have been talking a lot at work because I talk on the phone a lot as a salesperson. So, I figured, hey, maybe my throat's just getting a little sore from all the talking I've been doing. It has been a little bit. So, maybe that's just it. And then the next day, I woke up and my throat hurt really, really bad. And I know my body pretty well. I played baseball in college, and I've never been the biggest, strongest, fastest guy. So, I basically spent a lot of my time in high school and in, parts of college, like learning everything about how my body responds to things and learning about what my body tells me. Like if I have certain areas that start to itch, I know what that means based on what I've been doing. Or here is, most importantly in this instance, here is what my body does before it gets sick to know that I am getting sick. Now, what my body typically does when I get sick is it starts in my throat right here. It starts to get sore. Now, I have sore throats because of talking. I have sore throats just because of screaming or whatever, all the time. Not all the time, but sometimes it happens. So just because I have a sore throat doesn't necessarily mean that I'm sick. But if I am going to get sick, that is, I'd say, probably about 90 to 95% of the time, how it starts. So when I woke up that Tuesday morning and my throat was sore, I started to realize, based on how my head was feeling and how my throat was feeling based on the day before, that this was not a sore throat because of talking, that I was getting sick, in fact. So I called my boss and I said, hey, I know you're leaving for a trip this week, so I don't want to get you sick. I just started getting some symptoms. It hasn't fully hit me yet, but I think I'm going to get sick here in the next 24 hours. And so that was a Tuesday, and that night, Tuesday night, I had a 102.5-degree fever by the time I was done with work. So it hit me hard, and it hit me pretty quickly as well. So I was really, really sick that Tuesday. Slept okay. Wednesday morning, woke up. Fever had gone down, but it was still there. It was still over 100. Hadn't broken in a day, which was interesting because normally my fevers break within a few hours, so this is very odd. But eventually it did break, and then I was just left with the sore throat and a stuffy nose. Well, unfortunately, even though the original sickness only lasted probably 3 or 4 days, um, I ended up unfortunately getting a secondary infection off of that illness. Now, the doctors didn't know if it was bronchitis or a sinus infection, but they narrowed it down to one of those two. And they felt, based on the actual symptoms that I was having, that it was more likely a sinus infection than bronchitis, just because it started devolving to. I had a lot of mucus, basically. I wasn't, I was coughing because of that, not because there was some kind of something going on with my throat. But the reason why I haven't had to do I haven't been able to do a podcast is essentially because for the last 3 weeks, I've been incessantly coughing all the time. And so basically my podcast would have just been me talking for 2 seconds and then a hard cut to me repeating the same thing over and over again. And you would have just seen my energy level decline all throughout the video to the point where you got to the end, I would have been like talking like this. Yeah, so I just wanted to... Like, that's what it would have been like. So I decided to not do a podcast. I almost did one last week, but I was still coughing a little bit, and I wanted to just make 100% sure that I wasn't going to give you guys crummy content because I don't want to be doing that. So that's it. That's my explanation. That's why it has been so long. But and what's weird is I'm still having a little bit of residual stuff. Like I still do have a little bit of a stuffy nose, and I still feel some crap in my throat sometimes. And it's been almost a month now. I mean, like I said, the draft was the 27th, and I got sick that Tuesday morning, so it would have been the 25th, and it's May, I think, 18th? Yeah, May 18th right now. So you're talking about 4 weeks later, or 3.5 weeks later, from the time I got sick until now. I'm still having symptoms, unfortunately, but they're pretty much gone now. I'm not coughing anymore. It's just a bit of discomfort, so gonna give this to you guys here and now. And I was somehow, during this, able to record the special thing that's coming over the next week. So I hope you guys are excited for that, because I know I am. It's one of the best things I've ever done on this channel. And it was so popular that I'm actually going to be recording another thing like that again. So there's going to be 2 of them. So if you like the first one, hopefully you're going to like the second one as well. But I'll leave that surprise for when it comes out so that you guys have more stuff. So what are we going to be talking about other than me, obviously, as I just did for the last 8 or so minutes, this week? So I've got a few things I want to talk about. It's obviously been a few weeks. So I haven't talked about the draft. I haven't talked about the NBA playoffs. I have not talked about anything over the last 3 weeks. So the 3 things that I absolutely 100% have to hit on is going to be the Patriots draft. I'm going to talk about that. And maybe just a little bit of just generic NFL draft stuff. Definitely going to be talking about the Boston Celtics and their journey in the playoffs. And also my, just my thoughts on some of the other playoff series that have gone around and have been happening. Especially, the Milwaukee Bucks losing in the first round, which was obviously very shocking when it happened. Not quite as shocking now, considering it's been several weeks, but hey, I haven't had a chance to talk about it yet, so I'm going to give my thoughts on that. And the third thing is I'm going to talk about Ja Morant. I know a lot of people don't really want to talk about Ja Morant right now, but I think it's important. So I'm going to talk about that. First thing I want to talk about is actually going to be Ja Morant. As I just kind of mentioned, I want to get this out of the way because it's definitely going to be the thing that I want to talk about the least. Just because it's a sad situation, and I do wish that it was different, as a lot of people do, I'm sure. So, full disclosure, before I get into the specifics of what I'm talking about, for those of you who don't know already, I made a video about Ja Morant probably about 2 or 3 months ago at this point. It's been a long time. It would have been probably around late March that I made this video about the first time he was shown on social media or on the internet or whatever, flashing a gun at a nightclub and just doing stupid stuff. And he met with the commissioner of the NBA, and he basically told him that he was going to figure it out. He went into some correction program. He was only suspended for like 6 games or something. It might not even have been that many. It was not very many games. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was not very many. People thought he should have been suspended longer. It was one of those things where apparently, obviously he was shown on Instagram, or maybe not Instagram, but social media, flashing a gun, and then it came out that he had threatened a minor with his gun, and he was at a strip club and a nightclub doing stupid stuff and had a gun as well. So yeah, it was a whole mess. So he got suspended for that, went to correction program, and before I got sick over the last few weeks, 3 weeks ago, when I was going to make a video about the first round of the NBA playoffs, I actually planned on doing a segment about Ja Morant at that point. And what I was going to say was that I was actually very proud of him. And the reason why was because, you could believe whatever you want to believe. But when I heard his press conference after the Grizzlies were eliminated in the first round of the postseason by the Lakers, which I figured would happen, he said that his off-court actions affected the locker room. And so he's taking responsibility for the Grizzlies not making out of the first round because he let his team down. Now, you can believe, and I can believe, everybody can believe that to be the case or not. I obviously don't believe that it's all Ja Morant's fault. Just like I don't believe that it's all Dylan Brooks' fault, or Desmond Bane's fault, or Triple J's fault, or Steven Adams' fault for being hurt. Like, I don't believe any of that to be true. I think that it's a combination of everything. I think the Lakers, quite frankly, at this point, just have more experience, and they match up talent-wise well with the Grizzlies. And I think that Ja's off-court stuff, and Steven Adams being hurt, and Dylan Brooks being a weirdo and crazy person, and just being a strange character, distracting, the media and his teammates and all that stuff. Like, all that has to play a part, sure. But when Ja, who is supposedly supposed to be the leader of that franchise at this point, he's the best player on the team, so he's at the very least the leader on the court in terms of his play, even if he's not necessarily the quote-unquote locker room leader. The fact that he said that and recognized, hey, my off-court stuff played a part in the fact that we lost, and I'm taking responsibility for it, and I'm going to get this fixed moving forward. Like, that, to me, was noble, and I was proud of him for that. And again, I wish that I was able to make that video, because now you guys are just going to have to believe that that's what I was going to do, which if you can, you could believe me or you don't have to. I mean, it's up to you. I'm telling you the truth. Like, I truly was going to make that video, because I never want anybody to fail. I might not like a particular player or their attitude or something like that, or I might not like decisions that they make, or I might not think they're all that good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I want them to fail, and I don't want Ja Morant to fail. I think that he is one of the most entertaining and marketable superstars that the NBA has right now, and it's great that he's playing for a small market and he's getting that much attention, because a lot of small market teams don't have that, and I think that there should be more of that. So I don't want Ja Morant to fail. So when I saw the good things that he, they lost, and part of it was on him, and he took responsibility for not only his part, but he basically said it was all my fault, I was proud of him. But for those of you who do not know, Ja Morant was caught on social media with a gun again. And it was not even, or maybe just over, essentially 2 months removed from his first incident with a gun on social media. one of his buddies, I guess, taking an Instagram live video or whatever in the car, and they're jamming out to some music. And it's very brief. I saw the video. It's very brief. It doesn't get held on for very long, but it's very brief. But Ja Morant is very clearly holding a gun in his left hand, in this case, in his left hand in the passenger seat. And dancing and vibing to the music, whatever you want to say. And you just... I just shook my head, and I wished, much like I did a few months ago in that video, I wish that I could grab a hold of him and just tell him that I wish I had his ability to play basketball, or quite frankly, his ability to do anything in life. But unfortunately, God did not give me that. God gave me a bit of a gift of gab where I feel comfortable coming on here and speaking in coherent sentences most of the time, and being able to convey my thoughts in a way that's emotional and hopefully straightforward most of the time, and maybe, if I'm lucky, a little bit of entertainment goes along with that. But yeah, God gave me that, which I'm very grateful for, because it allows me to do this and other things in my life. But God did not give me the athleticism or the drive or the leaping ability or the strength or the shooting ability or the anything ability to be that good at basketball. And so I wish I could grab a hold of him and say, you have no idea what you are throwing away. And I know that people are going to say he has an idea of what he's throwing away. He knows that he's got this crazy, amazing career ahead of him, that he's potentially flushing down the toilet. And my counterpoint to that would be, no, if he knew what he was throwing away, he wouldn't be doing stupid stuff. Now, we've seen a lot of athletes, quote unquote, throw their careers away, right? But here's the thing. Like the person that comes to mind to me is Josh Gordon in the NFL. Wide receiver who led the NFL in yards and touchdowns one year for the Browns, just dominated. He was going to be, the next big thing in the NFL. And he just kept getting in trouble for doing drugs and smoking weed and all this stuff. And he would go to rehab, and he would get cleared, and then he would relapse again, and he would get caught again, and he'd get suspended for a full year again, and then he'd be let back in, and it would just keep on happening. And yes, well, obviously there's a lot of personal responsibility that goes along with that. Addiction is addiction, and addiction is very difficult and completely almost undefinable in a lot of ways for people. Like, you can give people direction, you can give people a 12-step program, you can give people support and love and completely shut them off from all that stuff and give them all these distractions to keep their mind off it. You can do everything you can, but addiction is addiction. And every person has an individual battle with addiction when they go through it. Everybody has, in some way, shape, or form, some kind of addiction, whether they know it or not, including myself, that they deal with on a daily basis. Addiction is addiction. So unless you are going to argue to me that Ja Morant is addicted to having a gun in his hand, this is not the same thing. I at least have sympathy for people who are going through addiction. While I might call Josh Gordon, or anybody else might call Josh Gordon an idiot for throwing away the potential career that he would have had, at least I have sympathy for the fact that he was truly knee-deep in a terrible addiction that got the best of him. And I can at least have sympathy for that. I have no sympathy for Ja Morant right now. Now, to be fair to Ja, I don't know what's going on in his life. I don't know what he's dealing with. I don't know the kind of people that he or his family is involved with. I don't know the full story, nor should I. But on the surface, when you take what has happened, when you dive into it a little bit, the mistakes that he made were having a gun and threatening a teenager with a gun and doing dumb stuff at a nightclub and a strip club. And then after he was punished, called out, suspended, knocked out of the first round of the playoffs, let all his teammates down, came out in public and said that he let his teammates down, and offered an apology, offered the fact that he's going to grow, he's going to change, he's going to adapt, he's going to whatever. Not 2 years, not 2 decades, 2 months go by. And you do the exact same thing that you got in trouble for 2 months ago. That you sat in front of the commissioner of basketball, essentially your big boss, who said, what are you doing? Do you have any idea what you're going to do to your brand and to our brand? Like, you're throwing this away, and you are so young and talented and smart. Like, we don't want that to happen to you, and so we need to get this figured out. And Ja basically looked at him and said, you got it, man. I'm going to get it figured out. I'm going to change. And 2 months goes by and you do the same thing? No, I have no sympathy for that. I can't possibly have any sympathy for that. Now, for me to sit here and say I've never made mistakes, it's lies. Of course I have. I've made millions of them, and I'll make millions more. But what I generally believe that I don't do is make the same mistake twice. If I make a mistake about something, I'm going to get it fixed. And if I do happen to make the same mistake twice, boy, let me tell you, I'll never make it 3 times. That I'm fully confident in. I am not going to make the same mistake 3 times in a row without changing around something I'm doing. And generally, I'm going to change it after the first time. So, I'm willing to sit here and say that the first time was a mistake. Or at least I was. I was willing to sit here and say that the first time that all that happened was being young and dumb, not understanding the opportunity you have. You get punished. You get put in a correction program. And yet you do it a second time after all that scrutiny, the amount of people that said that you let them down, the fact that your team, according to you, not according to me, because again, I don't believe that was the only reason, but according to you, the reason your team lost was because of your off the court antics and your off the court distraction. Let the team down. According to Ja Morant himself, said it. And yet after all that, you're still doing the same stupid stuff. No, I don't have any sympathy for that. So here's what I'll say now. Because now it's about, where do we go from here? Where does Ja go from here? What does the NBA do? And the sad thing is, especially for Memphis Grizzlies fans, he's going to get suspended. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's got a full year. At this point, he got a slap on the wrist the first time. I thought that he was going to get suspended for the rest of the season. I really did. And that's what it felt like. So when he only got suspended for a few games, it was like, wow, they took it easy on him. Wow, they are banking on the fact that he's going to turn it around. That's what I felt like. Now, I could be wrong, obviously. I'm not in the room when that stuff happens. But that's what I felt. I felt like they are really saying, hey, we're trusting that you feel bad enough about it. We're not going to suspend you for the rest of the year. But now, I don't think NBA has a choice. I think he's going to be suspended for at least half of a season, if not a full season, and he may even be suspended indefinitely. And I know based on his first suspension, that probably sounds harsh, and I hope it's not that harsh because I love watching Ja Morant play when he is fully healthy and fully engaged. But, man, I mean, what else do you do? I mean, you heard, maybe you didn't, but I heard the commissioner's statement during, I think it was the draft lottery, or maybe it was just during an interview. I don't remember, but he basically said like he was completely ambushed and so disappointed that Ja had made the same mistake again. And when a commissioner says that, I feel like that's really bad news. So Ja Morant, I feel like, is going to get suspended for probably a full season. And that is a shame because, yeah, he's dealt with some injuries here and there in his career so far. And I've also said publicly on this podcast that it seems sometimes like the Grizzlies are better without Ja. Although this year they were not better without Ja, so he seems to be turning that area around. But for the Grizzlies and Grizzly fans, like not having Ja is really, really not going to be good for ticket sales, season ticket sales, jersey sales, merch sales, anything. And plus, they're just not going to be as good. And at this point, Ja Morant is throwing away not even the prime of his career because he's still so young. I'm hesitant to even call it his prime. Like, he's what, 22, 23 at this point still? Like, he's so young. He's younger than me. So, is he even in his prime yet? But, like, these are crucial development years for him, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. And he's just throwing it away. And it's a shame. It's really, really a shame. Because despite all the criticism I've given Ja, I truly believe that when he is fully healthy, when he is fully engaged, and when he is playing at his best for a full season, I think that he genuinely, outside of Steph Curry, is the best point guard in basketball, or at the very least, he has the potential to be the best point guard in the league. And that is crazy to me at that young an age. He's up there. I mean, how many point guards played better than him this season on a per game basis? I don't know. Outside of Luka, who's considered a point guard now, I always look at him as a 2, but now he's more of a 1. So let's be honest. Maybe maybe you throw Devin Booker in there because he runs the offense a lot. But outside of that, and Steph, obviously, who I mentioned earlier, like, who was better than Ja on a per game basis when he was healthy and out there? Not very many people. Like, he could have been first team All NBA this year if he'd have stayed on the court and stayed healthy. So, despite all the criticism I give him, he is a top 10 basketball player in the league at his best. So, I want to see him succeed. I want to see him do well because it's fun. He's a lot of fun to watch, guys. In case you don't know, it's a trip. So, Ja Morant, I hope he figures it out. And part of me hopes that the suspension's not very long, and part of me hopes that it's a full year or indefinite because he needs to learn his lesson. And hopefully he'll become better because of all of this in the long run. Because at least hopefully, right? Someday he'll have a family. He'll have kids, grandkids. And I don't want anyone, especially his future family, to look at him as a guy who had it all and threw it all away. All right, let's talk about the NFL draft, specifically the New England Patriots portion of the NFL draft. I wish that I could take a deep dive on every team, but that ship has sailed at this point. I just don't have the time to be able to do that anymore. If I was going to be able to space it out over the last 3 weeks, I might have been able to do it. But at this point, if I did it, I mean, nobody would even care because the draft would have been long gone by that point. So I'm going to just give a few nuggets of thoughts that I have on the draft. Starting with Carolina Panthers at number 1 at Bryce Young. I think it was the right decision. A lot of people were on the CJ Stroud train for number 1 there for a while. And, we even had Anthony Richardson at number 1 for a little bit there for some mock drafts. Even Will Levis, who I'll get to in a minute, at number 1 at times. And I think in Vegas, the Vegas odds had Will Levis as like the second highest odds to go at number 1 before the draft. Like crazy stuff. So, there was a lot of different hype trains going on for that number 1 pick. I never subscribed to anything other than Bryce Young going number 1. I think if you look back at my mock drafts, it'll support that. I truly believed, even as an Ohio State fan as I am, that Bryce Young was the best quarterback in this draft. CJ Stroud was the number 2 quarterback in this draft. I truly believed that. I think that they're both fantastic. I think they both have their own pros and cons. But I think for Carolina, and at least to me overall, you could definitely argue C.J. Stroud as just a better prospect than Bryce Young maybe because he might have a higher ceiling, although I don't think he has a higher ceiling than Bryce Young, quite frankly, but some people do just because of his size and athleticism. But for me, I think that Carolina needs a Bryce Young more than they need a C.J. Stroud right now. I think that, you took some project quarterbacks You have another guy who you took in the draft last year in Matt Corral. So there's just not a whole lot of big game experience in that locker room in Carolina. And I think, yes, CJ Stroud did have some big game experience, but Bryce Young has more. I think he has been a more proven leader. Obviously, he has won a billion games at Alabama. So for me, I would say Bryce Young to me has always been the number one pick for the Panthers. Now, if the Bears had stayed at number one, maybe I could see them have taken CJ Stroud. Maybe if you had to pick two, because I just don't think Bryce Young fits that system more than CJ Stroud does. But once Carolina traded up, I thought it was going to be Bryce Young all the way. And I would have felt the same if it was Indianapolis or if it was Tennessee. It just would have felt right to me for Bryce Young at number one, so I think that was great. Houston at number 2 and number 3. I mean, that was to me the shock of the draft. Other than Will Levis, but again, we'll get to that. Houston drafting C.J. Stroud at number 2, which again I thought was the right move, and then trading up to 3 from 12 to get Will Anderson Jr. at Alabama. I thought that was really fun. Now, do I completely agree with it? No, because I've always, and I've said this on this channel a million times, so it shouldn't be a surprise. I've always been of the mindset that if your team is not good and you need a lot of depth, you need to trade for more draft picks instead of less. So the fact that Houston traded up and gave up their first round pick next year, which if you're Arizona, you got to be thrilled because, yeah, you didn't get Will Anderson, but you traded up eventually to get Paris Johnson, who's a fantastic tackle, to help protect your former number one overall pick quarterback, who's presumably going to be the quarterback of the future at this point. I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary, even though there's been a lot of chatter that he might not be. But presumably he will be, so you got to protect him. And you got the Houston Texans first-round draft pick for this upcoming draft. So if your team is awful again, and Houston stays awful and doesn't take as big a step as we all think they might, considering the moves they made, like, if they're a bottom 5 team again, you have a chance to have 2 top 5 picks in the 2024 draft. So for Arizona, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer, but for Houston, you're rebuilding. You need more draft picks, not less. So I thought that it was while it was fun, certainly, and I like the fact that Houston is taking a step forward and saying the rebuild's over, we're good to go, we're jumping all in. I think it's a little too early. I think it's a year or maybe even 2 too early. And I think they need more depth. They got some more depth this offseason in free agency and, of course, in the draft. So that's great. But I don't think they're quite ready to be a playoff team, although the division's not all that good. So, maybe it happens outside of Jacksonville. I'd say that it's wide open. With Tennessee, is pretty much completely starting over with Will Levis. Although maybe Tannehill starts again this year. I don't know. Maybe they give Will Levis a year to learn under Tannehill. Maybe. But to me, they're rebuilding at this point, or at least they're starting a rebuild. They're not fully rebuilding because they haven't traded away everybody, though they got rid of pretty much their entire offensive line. The only guy that's still around is Derrick Henry on the offensive side. And seriously, defensive tackle. What is his name? He's an absolute animal. Jeffrey Simmons. There you go. I don't know why I was blanking. There's not a whole lot of talent left back on that team at this point. So, for me, they're rebuilding. Indianapolis is clearly rebuilding. They just drafted AR-15 at number 4. I thought that was a good pick too. They're rebuilding, and Jacksonville is obviously at this point they're on the rise. So outside of Jacksonville, that division is pretty much wide open. You might be able to sneak a wild card spot. So if Houston, you know what? Go ahead, go for it. I get it, but I just think it's a year too early. Although it was exciting. Other picks that I thought were interesting. Obviously the Lions. I mean, for me, it was like, what are you doing? I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I would have loved for the Patriots to draft him in the second round and just have him be a weapon. But you hear what I just said in the second round. not at 12 like the Detroit Lions drafted him. Uh, I feel like, because here's the thing for me. I love Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think that he's actually going to be a really good NFL player. I think that his versatility and the fact that he can catch balls out of the backfield, he's a pretty good blocker. He's obviously a very, very strong runner. I think, I think he'll be fine in the NFL. I think he might actually do really, really well for them if he can stay healthy. But the thing is for me, I've been Team Bijan Robinson for forever. And you had the 6th pick. And you traded back and got, to me, a significantly inferior running back prospect. Now, again, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be good in the NFL. But to me, unless you are a undeniable, no doubt, like you're probably going to be a top 3 running back the second you put cleats on and you put the uniform on, you should not be going top 10 in the draft if you're a running back. And a lot of people subscribe to that. I'm not somebody that thinks you should never draft a running back in the first round. I'm somebody that thinks that if you are a rebuilding team, you should never draft a running back in the first round. Because it's just not that important to draft a running back that early when oftentimes you can get running backs that are just as good, if not better, in later rounds. For instance, right? Before I actually get that, there are some exceptions, obviously. Like, Josh Jacobs has been fantastic for the Raiders, even though they haven't really gone anywhere. I don't think anybody would think that the Raiders should not have drafted Josh Jacobs in the first round like they did. And I'm sure there's more, but for me, that's why I wanted the Eagles to draft Bijan, because I thought it made perfect sense considering they just went to the Super Bowl, and they're basically just adding to a war room full of monsters that are already there. Now, yeah, they did lose a few people in the offseason, sure, but they're still the favorite to go to the Super Bowl in the NFC as far as I'm concerned. I don't see anybody outside of maybe the 49ers that are going to beat them. Now, you could definitely argue the 49ers are the favorite, but so, let's say those two are the favorite. Either way, they're one of the top 2. So for me, like Bijan Robinson, yeah, maybe running back wasn't the biggest need for them, but Bijan to me is the best player in the draft outside of Will Anderson for all positions. So going to the guys who just went to the Super Bowl, if you've got a bell cow running back now, it's going to put up 15, 16, 1,700 yards as a rookie probably if he stays healthy. Like, whew, that offense would be unstoppable. So I loved that. But for Atlanta, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me for them to draft Bijan. Just because, I understand you drafted a wide receiver in the first. Actually, let me go in chronological order. You drafted a tight end in the first round. Skill position play. Well, not necessarily a skill position player, but offensive player, tight end number 1, could be a franchise guy. I think that's fair. You drafted Drake London, wide receiver, in the first round. You're expecting a first-round wide receiver to be one of the best in the NFL. So you drafted that skill position very high up in the draft. And now you draft Bijan. What I can see that they are trying to get superstars at skill position players at a young age so that now they can start drafting and signing other positions, which they did a little bit this offseason, to be fair. Jesse Bates and a few others. So, fair enough. But I don't think a running back is going to make you go from a 500 team to a playoff team or a 12-win team. I just don't see it. I think that a running back, especially if you draft them in the first round, it's just not as valuable for a team that's not very good, and especially if they don't have a very good offensive line, because you could throw a 5th-round running back there and they may be just as effective just because the offensive line's awful, the scheme might not be great, you just don't have a lot of talent around them. So, for me, it didn't make much sense. But, going back to the Jahmyr Gibbs and the Detroit Lions stuff, you had the 6th pick, so why not just take Bijan there? I still wouldn't have loved it. I would have thought that they would have probably should have prioritized other positions at that point, such as corner, or linebacker, or edge rusher, or even wide receiver if you want to go that early. But For me, running back at 6 would have still been a stretch. But you know what? I would have said the same thing I said with Atlanta. I don't love the fit. I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense. But Bijan's the best player in the draft, on offense at least. So I get it. I would have said the same thing. And honestly, I think he fits better in Detroit because at least Detroit was like a technicality away from making the playoffs last year. So you could argue having a bell cow running back's going to unlock that offense and bring them to a whole nother level. Maybe instead of winning 8 games or 9 games, they win 10 or 11 games and they make the playoffs in a division where outside of, again, one team, which is the Minnesota Vikings, you're probably the favorite to win that division at this point. So, for me, I would have liked to have seen Detroit not draft Jahmyr Gibbs at 12. Now, I get it. You want extra draft capital, and that's fine. But if you're going to take a running back in the first round, you had the 6th pick. Bijan was on the board. Take Bijan. That's the way I look at it. And then Jack Campbell in the first round. I like Jack Campbell. Didn't think he was a first-round pick. I think in earlier mock drafts, I may have had him just barely sneaking into the first round at the very back end. But Detroit, I don't remember what number they drafted him at. I think it was like 23, 24, 26. I don't know. I just didn't see him going that early. Especially later on, I definitely didn't see him going that early. So I thought the Lions had a weird draft. I'll say that. I thought the Eagles had a spectacular draft. They are basically Georgia in the NFL now. They're drafting all the Georgia defensive players, which I think is great because obviously you have a dominant defense in college, in the SEC. Bring it to the NFL and see that competitiveness and see that fire. So, to me that makes a lot of sense. So I like that. Okay. Now, to the Patriots. All right. Let's talk about how the Patriots did in the first round. Now, I find it hysterical, at least for me, just because for me, every year I do mock drafts on this channel. Now, it's only been a couple of years. It's only been 2 years that I've been doing it, obviously, but I'm going to be doing them for as many years as I do this. I'm going to be doing mock drafts. I'm going to be saying who I think the Patriots should draft in all of one of the mock drafts. I'm going to tell you guys the ideal picks that I would like, the ideal prospects that I'd like to see the Patriots draft, who my favorite players are on the draft. Like, I'm going to give you guys all that. And I just find it so funny because I basically should just trade back every year because that's what the Patriots do. And I've been watching the draft and watching the Patriots my whole life. So I don't know why I haven't learned my lesson at this point, that they're just going to trade back over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, even if a prospect that will perfectly help your team is right there. Hell, even 3 prospects that will perfectly help your team are sitting right there. They're still not going to draft them. That's just how it's going to work. They're just going to trade back, and then God only knows who they're going to pick. So, to me, the draft is coming up, and I'm thinking, man, if the Patriots trade back, I'd love Brian Branch, and Brian Branch ended up going in the second round. I was so upset. I'm pretty sure he got drafted 1 pick before the Patriots pick in the second round, too. And whoever it was traded up. And so I can guarantee you the Patriots would have taken Brian Branch if he was still there at that point. But nonetheless, I digress. I should just know by now. The Patriots are going to trade back. So I think I had the Patriots trading back maybe I had them in my last mock draft trade back. I can't remember how I did that, but maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I'll have to go back and look. But either way, I should just know at this point that they're going to trade back. So I'm not going to lie to you. When it got to pick 14. Yeah, 14. When it got to pick 14, the Patriots were on the clock. I was so happy because my ideal first round would have been Jackson Smith and Jigba. I am a huge fan of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Again, I've said it, I'm an Ohio State fan in this podcast and other podcasts, but just in case you don't know for some reason. Jackson Smith and Jigba is one of my favorite wide receiver prospects I've ever had the pleasure of doing videotape on and scouting and just trying to diagnose what kind of player they're going to be. I think that Jackson Smith and Jigba will be the next great wide receiver in the NFL if he can stay healthy. Now, I don't know if he'll blossom into that right away in Seattle. Spoiler alert, Patriots did draft him just in case you didn't know. Because he's behind two other great wide receivers right now. Now, they could put him in the slot, or they could put Tyler Lockett in the slot and have JSN and DK Metcalf on both outside boundaries for wide receivers, which, forget it. I don't even want to talk about it, but I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is probably a little bit better served in the slot based on his skill set. But he could obviously be a fantastic outside wide receiver too. He's a burner. He can run fast. He can go by guys. He's, about a little less than 6'1", so he's not gigantic, but he's not super tiny either. So, he's a guy that can do just about everything. And so I don't think he'll blossom into maybe he will, but I don't think he'll blossom into like a 1,500-yard wide receiver and 13 touchdowns his rookie year just because he's got two other great wide receivers on his team that are going to need the ball too. So, again, maybe he will, and I hope he does, but I just don't see it because of just the depth chart situation that he's got going on. But when he was there at 14, I'm like, oh, man. Jackson Smith-Njigba's on the board. Christian Gonzalez is on the board too. That would be fine, but I really love Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'd love for them to take a chance on the best wide receiver in the draft. Just go for it. And then they traded back. It's just like, oh, dang it, I should have known. Like, I'm never going to get Jackson Smith-Njigba because, you don't know who guys are trading up for. If a really good skill position player falls, to me at least, when somebody trades up, that's the default. Like, they're going after Will Levis, who I didn't even talk about. I do need to talk about that, by the way. Talk about that at the end. So, whether it's a quarterback, whether it's a wide receiver, whether it's a DB, whether it's an edge rusher, like positions that are valuable, I'm thinking people are trading up for them first. So when Jackson Smith-Njigba starts falling, I'm like, oh, somebody traded up for him. I saw it was the Steelers. I'm like, I don't think they need wide receiver. But you know what? They take 1 million wide receivers every year anyway, so maybe they're going to take Jackson Smith-Njigba. They didn't. They took, I don't remember who they took. They took a tackle. I'm blanking on who they took, but it wasn't Jackson Smith-Njigba at all. And then, so we traded back to 17, and now we're at 17, and Christian Gonzalez and Jackson Smith-Njigba are both on the board. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is great. And I said, I was like, hey, I love Jackson Smith-Njigba. That would be ideal. I would love that. But you know what? If we take Christian Gonzalez, that's great too. Because he's probably a top 10 to 12 prospect. Maybe even sooner for a lot of people, because there was a lot of debate whether he was CB1 or CB2. I personally like Devin Witherspoon a little better just because he's the kind of player I gravitate to. He's the scrappy guy. He's very physical. Yeah, he's a little undersized, but he makes up for it with physicality and guts. And, I just relate more to that. So maybe that's just my own personal bias to the kind of player he is. And he's just a hammer, dude. Like, he hits people hard. So, that's just kind of football I like, and I just kind of gravitate more towards that kind of player. But Christian Gonzalez, the more I watched tape of him leading up to the draft, the more I was like, man, this guy, if he gets in the right situation, this guy's going to be scary good. I mean, he's just so smooth and fluid and effortless in everything he does. He has long arms, so his press ability is phenomenal, even just coming right out of the draft. Although, maybe I'm not watching the right tape, but a lot of scouts seem to think his press is actually his weakest point. But from what I saw, he seems to be fine. But, maybe I need to watch more tape. And obviously I'll see him a lot more up close because, spoiler, where he got drafted. But, yeah, I was like, hey, Christian Gonzalez would be great too. I'd take either one of those guys because we need some defensive back help for sure. The 97 Joneses in the back, in the back nine for the Patriots in the secondary, not going to get it done all the time. Can't just have nothing but Joneses back there. Although, obviously, Jonathan Jones and Jack Jones both did pretty well this year. But either way, We need some defensive back help. We need some, especially an outside corner, so like it makes sense. But I would just love Jackson Smith-Njigba. I'm a huge fan of his game. And then so they picked Gonzalez. I was like, okay, like that, fine. You know, not. I was happy about it. I was, because I like Christian Gonzalez, and I think that he fits the Patriots perfectly. And he's exactly what we need in the secondary as a number one boundary corner. But at the same time, I would have loved Jackson Smith-Njigba. So it was like, yeah, like, didn't know how to feel. And then obviously he meaning Jackson Smith-Njigba went 3 picks later to the Seahawks. I was hoping the Patriots would trade up because they had like 15 draft picks. It was ridiculous how many they had. I was hoping they'd use some of it to trade back up if Smith-Njigba kept falling, but it obviously didn't happen. Didn't really trade up a whole lot in the draft either. I think we might have traded up like once in the 4th round at one point, or traded into the 5th round. I don't know, like back and stuff. Like they didn't trade up a whole lot. So, yeah, it was one of those things where I liked the pick a lot, but I would have just rather had JSN just for my own personal bias. But hey, listen, the pick itself, I mean, the Patriots had a great draft. I mean, this time last year, if you guys remember, one of my favorite videos to, to kind of tell people about or to introduce them to my podcast is me ranting about how bad the Patriots draft was last year. I don't know if you guys saw that. If you have, go check it out. It's one of my favorite videos I've done just because I got a giant weight off my chest and I just was so angry and I needed to explode. It's so much better when they have a good draft, So much more peaceful. You get to go about your life and not be angry for a few days. It's very nice. It's very nice. So I think the Patriots had a great draft, and it started with that. I mean, first of all, you got the guy you wanted, clearly. I mean, they wanted Christian Gonzalez. They got him. And he fits the team perfectly. And from what I saw when he walked up to the podium and in his interviews, he fits the personality of the Patriots too. Bland, not smiling, no jokes, no anything crazy, no real flashy stuff. Although he did have, I think, the Colombian, is he Colombian? I think he's Colombian. Flag in his suit, which I thought was cool. Outside of that, I mean, there wasn't really a whole lot to report on. He wasn't super excited. He wasn't really happy. He wasn't really mad. He was just kind of meh. And I'm like, yep, he's a Patriot already. He knows, he gets it. No emotions, no personality, no fun. You're on the Patriots, and that's it. So he's got it. He's already there. So I thought that not only getting him, who fits the team perfectly, but trading back and getting an extra 4th round pick to also take that guy at 17, and a guy who probably could have gone top 10 in a lot of other drafts if we were in a parallel universe. Whoo! Like, we've seen corners go way earlier in a lot of drafts in the past than they should have gone. And in this one, the Patriots got a fantastic corner that fits their team perfectly. Like, probably anywhere from 7 to 10 picks after he should have gone, and they traded back and got extra draft capital for later. Brilliant start to the draft. Keon White, I thought, was a really, really good pick there as well in the 2nd round. I think that, while edge rusher was not the biggest need, I actually had the Patriots at one of my mock drafts going Lucas Van Ness, or at the very least I talked heavily about it. Maybe I didn't end up drafting Lucas Van Ness there, but I would have been okay with him going, and I think he went 1 pick before the Patriots too. The 1st round pick for the Patriots. So, fine, whatever. I think that we still need help for pass rush, and Keon White is a guy that can play standing up. He can play with his hand in the dirt. He can play on a 3-point. He can do anything on the defensive line. He can even stand up and be, a stand-up linebacker or a stand-up pass rusher. He can be a defensive tackle, defensive end, outside linebacker. He can move all over the defensive line and play in a multitude of different ways, and basically play himself on the field in all 4 downs. He's big enough that you feel comfortable at 285. You're 6'4" or 6'5", 285, big guy. You could stick him on the inside on pass downs, and feel like he can get some pressure up the middle. But also you feel comfortable putting him on run downs because he is a guy that can eat up blocks and take up space because he's not 250 or 260. He's 285. He's a bigger guy. So, in theory, he'd be a little better just, build-wise in a run defense as well. So, he's a guy that you could play on all four downs. Now, whether he will play on all four downs for the Patriots is completely, it's just a wait and see kind of thing. But he has the profile to play all four downs. He has the versatility to play all four downs. So I think it's a great pick and a good weapon for Bill Belichick and that defense to utilize. Marte Mapu out of I almost said San Francisco State. That's not right. Sacramento State. I don't know what happened there. But I thought that he was a solid pick as well. I mean, to say that I knew a ton about Marte Mapu going into the draft, I mean, I would just be lying to you. I didn't. He was from Sacramento State, guys. Like, come on. Like, how much do you expect a man to know, right? So, I thought he was really, really versatile. Once he got drafted, I was able to kind of look into his backstory and look at some tape and find out some stuff. And man, this guy is a different form of Kyle Duggar. And what I mean is, so Kyle Duggar to me, and this is up for interpretation, Kyle Duggar to me is more of a linebacker than a safety. I think he's more of a thumper. He's a little bit better in rundowns than he is dropping back in pass coverage. Now, he's not bad at pass coverage. I'm not saying that, but I just think that he fits better. His profile fits better as like a strong safety / linebacker on the inside. Whereas Marte Mapu, I think, is the opposite, where I think he can slide down and play linebacker, but I think he is a guy that's better suited covering tight ends and bigger and a little bit slower wide receivers than he is being a thumper. But both guys are versatile enough to play linebacker and safety, drop back into coverage and be in the box. Like, I think Marte Mapu is going to kind of be a perfect complement to Kyle Duggar. And now I don't know if they're planning on playing both of them at the same time, or if they're, planning on playing one in certain schemes and the other in certain schemes, or if one's not really going to play much at all, whereas the other is going to play a ton. If that's the case, I expect Kyle Duggar to play a ton and Marte Mapu not to play a whole lot. But either way, I liked that pick as well. Obviously, we went on a run of offensive linemen for a little while there. So not a whole lot to talk about there. I mean, offensive linemen are offensive linemen. You draft them late in drafts. It's what you do. We needed some offensive line depth. Fine. That's fine with me. Would I have liked flashier picks? Maybe a couple more wide receivers. Maybe, I don't know, another corner. Did we draft another corner? I don't think we did. Maybe we did. I don't remember. They had 1 million picks, guys. I can't remember all of them. I mean, I'm serious. I think they had 12. I'm pretty sure they had 12 picks. Like, so many. So many picks. But what did catch my eye was when they drafted Kayshon Boutte out of LSU. Now, so for me, I thought that was one of the steals of the draft because I know when I started, after last year's draft, when I started very lightly prepping for this year's draft, pretty much right away, as we all kind of have to do. We all kind of have to go with, hey, let's look at who's upcoming, who experts think are going to be first-round picks next year, keep our eyes on some people, and then as the year goes along, people move up, people move down, people drop out of the draft entirely because they're staying in school or just because they weren't any good or injuries or whatever. People come out of absolutely nowhere from other countries or from other, colleges, and they hadn't played a lick at Ohio State, and then they transferred to West Virginia and put up almost Heisman Trophy numbers or whatever. Things happen all the time. So at the very beginning, Kayshon Boutte was a first-round projected pick. I mean, he was a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal prospect. He had put up like 1,800 yards at LSU or something crazy like that 2 years ago, or 1,400, whatever it was. And then last year was just a train wreck. He got hurt. He played poorly. He didn't show a whole lot of effort. He didn't seem to care, and then his combine, when he got invited to the combine, it was awful. I mean, he was ranking, bottom third in just about every aspect, strength, speed, agility, hands. Everything was just a disaster. His pro day was a disaster. Everything over the last couple of years has been a disaster. Now, I don't know why it's been a disaster. Hopefully, he turns it around. But I'll tell you what, if the Patriots even get half of the player he was in college, half of the production, and he ends up turning into something, a good number 3 wide receiver, a solid number 2 wide receiver, that's a steal of a 6th round pick right there. I mean, again, Kayshon Boutte, it cannot be harped on enough, was, if you go back in early mock drafts of 2023, back in like April of 2022, people projecting a year ahead, Kayshon Boutte was a top 10 or top 15 pick by most people. Like, he was that good. He was supposed to be the number 2 wide receiver in the draft, right behind Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, the fact that, yeah, he had a train wreck of a season and a train wreck of a combine and a train wreck of a pro day really hurt his draft stock, obviously. So, you got him in the 6th round. Now, instead of taking a 1st round pick and it being a train wreck, now, if it's a 6th round pick and he's a train wreck, who cares? He's a 6th round pick, but you got a guy who at one point was universally considered one of the best wide receivers in college, if not the very best. So I think it's a huge steal for the Patriots. I don't think enough people are talking about it. Not to say that he's going to be the next great wide receiver. He probably won't be, because, again, the last year of his life has been a complete train wreck. So you think maybe something's going on up here, or he just doesn't have anything going on. Not that he doesn't have anything going on up there. That didn't come out right. But that he just doesn't have the mental strength to push forward and to be an NFL player. Perhaps. I don't know. But heck, you took a chance on him in the 6th round. He's talented, clearly. Let's see what he's got. So I thought that was great. That's going to be the end of my thoughts on the Patriots draft. I do want to talk about Will Levis, because I said I was going to and I forgot, so I'm going to talk about it now. Will Levis got drafted in the 2nd round. Man, that was nuts. I was so confused because, look, I'll be honest. I'm not a big fan of Will Levis. I tried to be as cordial as possible as it pertained to Will Levis during the draft process, because I gotta be honest, I didn't see what other people saw. I mean, people thought he was a top 5 pick. Like, I just didn't see it. Like, but there are some opinions that I have to try and keep to myself, right? Like, if I'm the only person on the entire planet that thinks that Will Levis was not a top 10 talent, then maybe I'm wrong. I mean, that's probably pretty likely that I'm wrong in that instance. So, I saw him going, top 20 in the draft. I'm like, all right, I get it. Then I started seeing him go top 15. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's some bad teams. Then I saw him going top 10, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd take him top 10. Then I saw him going top 4, top 5, and I'm like, oh, God. I would just have been so disappointed if I was a team drafting him top 5. Now, I didn't want to say that before the draft started, because I felt like I was the only one who felt that way. So I just went, you know what? The experts are saying that he's this good. Maybe I'm missing something. So I just, in that aspect, I just kind of went along with that. Like, I put him where I thought he would fit. Typically I didn't put him in top 5 scenarios, although I think by the end I might have, just because everybody else was. And I just was like, okay, I guess if that's what people are hearing, we're this close to the draft, I guess that's what's happening. But if it was up to me, not that he wouldn't have been a 1st round pick. Obviously, he would have been a 1st round pick for me. Like, it's not that I didn't think he was any good. I just didn't see the top 5 or top 10 hype that people were giving. Now, again, to say that I didn't think he'd be a 1st round pick is not true at all. I mean, I was sure he'd be one, just based on raw ability. But, it shocked me, but it out of all the, it would have really shocked me if AR-15 was the one that this happened. It's been a long few weeks, guys, that this happened to. There you go. I can speak English. I would have been really shocked if that had happened. But the fact that it happened to Will Levis, it shocked me a little bit, because I really thought that just based on raw ability, he'd go in the 1st round. Or at least somebody would trade up for him at the very back end of the 1st round, like they did Lamar Jackson a few years ago. But it didn't happen. He went 7 or 8 picks into the second round. Like, man, that is wild. That is wild. Good luck in Tennessee, dude. I really hope that you do well. Um, I think you're probably already better than Ryan Tannehill, but I've never had a high opinion of Ryan Tannehill, so take that with a grain of salt, I guess. But yeah, I hope that it works out for him. I like the fact that Tennessee took a swing on a quarterback, even one that I don't believe in as much as the other ones, like I do Will Levis, right? Tennessee, you needed something. You needed something to hang your hat on. I get it. Go for a quarterback. Go get your guy. I like it. So good for Tennessee. Hope it works out for Will Levis, and I hope he uses it as a chip, and I hope he ends up becoming great and being a great quarterback for the NFL. Because again, like I said with the John Morant stuff earlier, I don't wish failure upon anyone. I don't want any player to fail. I don't want any player to play poorly and end up losing their career. Like, just because I don't particularly see first round, not first round, but like top 20 pick potential in Will Levis doesn't mean that he doesn't have it or that I don't want to see it. It's just that I don't see it currently, and maybe he can grow into it. I don't know. But we'll see. Either way, fun pick for the Tennessee Titans. Not a fun day and a half for Will Levis, I'm sure, but hey, what are you going to do? All right, last but not least, I am going to be talking about the NFL playoffs and then, of course, my thoughts on the Boston Celtics season so far. Let's start with the just generic playoffs. So, obviously, I have at this point, maybe you guys don't know this, I've been recording for about an hour at this point, so I'm going to try and fly through this as best I can and get this out for you guys as quickly as possible. Yeah, so where do I even start with the playoffs, man? I guess I got to start with the obvious one, right? First round, a lot of upsets, obviously, or at least a handful of upsets, I would say. And the biggest one clearly was the Milwaukee Bucks getting bounced in 5 games by the Miami Heat. Crazy stuff. Look, we'll get to more about the Miami Heat later on. Obviously, they're playing the Celtics currently. Even though I truly am afraid of the Miami Heat all the time, nobody in their right mind picked the Heat to beat the Bucks. Come on. Like, the Bucks were the best team in the NBA this year. It clear as day. Guy who's arguably the best player in basketball, and Giannis is on your team. You got a fully healthy squad pretty much going into that series. And Giannis gets hurt. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that's the reason they lost. Don't think that's the reason. They lost every game he played. The only game that they won was the one game maybe one of the 2 games he did not fully play in. Every other game that he was in or not in, they lost. So the one game that they ended up winning in that series, Giannis didn't even play, as far as I remember. So not the reason that they lost. And not people say, oh, he wasn't 100%. I'm pretty sure he averaged like 35 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. You could say he's not fully healthy, but he was playing like he was. So, like, I don't find that to be an excuse either. I just think, quite frankly, the Milwaukee Bucks underestimated the Miami Heat and got ambushed on a game-to-game basis, and the Miami Heat just took it to them day after day after day, and by the time the Milwaukee Bucks realized what they were in for, it was too late. That's what I think happened. And, a lot of people picked the Bucks to win the championship this year. And obviously, as a Celtics fan, my heart said, no, the Celtics are winning the championship this year, clearly. But my brain said Milwaukee was probably going to win it because they were just a better team, or at least we thought, but obviously not. So, crazy stuff with that. Jimmy Butler is on another level, and again, we'll get more into the Miami Heat here in a few minutes, so I'll try and hold off on diving into the team too much. So, moving on, another series that nobody picked the Heat to beat the Bucks. Nobody, not even the Heat picked the Heat to beat the Bucks, probably. So, I got that wrong in my predictions. Obviously, I thought that the 2 upsets that would happen where the Lakers would beat the Grizzlies and the Warriors would beat the Kings. And guess what? Both of them happened. So, I feel like every other series I did pretty well. I did think that the Cleveland Cavaliers would beat the Knicks. because I just thought that the Cavs had a better team, top to bottom, but obviously that didn't happen either. But it didn't shock me too much that the Knicks won. I just figured that it wouldn't have been a great matchup for the Knicks to face the Cavs, but obviously I was completely wrong, and the Knicks just dominated the Cavs, quite frankly. So either way, we talked about the Ja Morant stuff earlier with the upset of the Lakers upsetting them. So I won't get into it too much. It didn't shock me at all. I thought the Lakers from just everything I was watching towards the end of the year, I thought that they were hot. I thought that they were playing really great defense. They were starting to gel offensively and get that moving. And plus, with everything going on with the Grizzlies, I just didn't think they had much of a chance, and they really didn't. So didn't surprise me much. Now, I did not expect the Kings to put up nearly as good of a fight against the Warriors as they did. I really thought that the Warriors would win in 5. I'm pretty sure I even said on this podcast that it wouldn't go past 5. I thought maybe the Kings would sneak one of the first 2 games and the Warriors would blow them out for the rest. So the Kings showed me something, showed me some guts that I didn't think they had. So good for the Kings. And I'd say that they were really close to beating the Warriors, but I watched that entire Game 7 bell to bell, and it never felt like the Kings had a chance for that entire game. I don't know if it was just me knowing that the Warriors are going to win just from experience or what, but for me, I didn't think the Kings had a chance from the minute that it tipped off. It just didn't feel like the Kings, not that they played poorly. I don't think they really played that poorly. I just think that the Warriors have a Steph Curry, and that's really it. I mean, literally, that's what I hate about basketball sometimes. So it's obviously a superstar-driven sport, and I understand that. It's a lot of fun that way. But, you don't even have to have a better team. And you just have a superstar on your team, and they just basically, yell it's over 9,000, scream really loud, their hair turns blonde, and then they're unstoppable for a game, and then your team's eliminated from the playoffs. Because, even if even if the other guys don't have a better team than you, you've got that superstar, and so that's it. And I really just felt like that's what happened in Game 7. Watching that game, it was just that Steph Curry decided, it's Game 7, third quarter. What are we, up by 3? All right, yeah. I guess I'll just be unstoppable now. Sounds good to me. Bing, 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 bing. What are you gonna? You can't do anything at that point. You're a child playing against your father, and your father's got his hand out on your forehead, and you're just swinging wildly trying to, and he's just hitting layups over you because you can't do. That's just what it feels like sometimes when you play Steph Curry, or when you play LeBron, or when you play Jimmy Butler, or when you play any of these other superstars that teams have. So to me, that's just what it felt like. But hey, listen, the Kings had a great year. I really did not give them any credit all year. I thought that they were pretenders, and I think that if they had played a different team in the first round, they probably would have beaten them. I think that if they had scratched out the 2 seed, I think that they might have even been able to beat the Lakers, even though the Lakers pretty much destroyed the Grizzlies, so maybe not. I definitely think that if they had played, I don't even remember who the heck the 5 seed was. Who was the 5 seed this year? I know the 4 seed was Phoenix. Who did Phoenix play in the first round? Obviously nobody that matters because I can't remember. Anyway, I'm sure somebody in the comment section is going to scream at me and tell me it's the Farfig Nougat. All right. It's the Farfig Nougat. Fine. And I'm sure I'll think of it in the middle of whatever else I'm saying too. But, if they had played a different team in the first round, I really feel like they probably would have been fine. So yeah, one of those things where I think I didn't give the Kings a lot of credit. I really didn't, and so they had a great year. Second round of the playoffs, I mean, not really a whole lot of surprises for me. Warriors, Lakers. I didn't really know who to pick. Because I didn't want either of them to win. It was one of those things where because I'm looking at it as a Celtics fan going, I don't want to face the Warriors again. They ruined us in the finals, and I definitely don't want to face LeBron in the finals. Even at his age, He's still LeBron, and I'm a Celtics fan, which means I have a lot of PTSD facing LeBron in the playoffs. A lot of PTSD facing LeBron in the playoffs, and him just making my life miserable for much of my life in the playoffs. So I don't want to face either of those teams. So to me, it was just like, well, I guess whoever wins, I'll be okay with it. And the Lakers won, so sure, I guess, fine. I mean, I feel like they have the better team, top to bottom. So I guess it makes sense, but like it was almost like you wanted to face whoever lost because you'd see the weaknesses, right? Like that's kind of how it feels for me. Yeah. So I don't know. The Lakers won, cool. And the Nuggets destroyed the Suns. I did think that was a little surprising. I thought the Suns would put up a little bit more of a fight, but without CP3 and then without DeAndre Ayton at the end, they weren't at full strength, so you can make that argument, but I hate to say this, but I think at this point CP3 is not much help. I mean, I just don't think he is at this point in this age. He can't stay healthy in the playoffs. And even if he does stay healthy in the playoffs, he doesn't usually play all that well anyway. So, I don't know. I think at this point, you're going to have to evaluate whether CP3 is worth it. He's a great player. He's one of the best point guards of all time. In my mind, first ballot Hall of Famer. One of my favorite players ever. But at this point in his career, he's just not the same player he was. He's a liability on defense. He's not a great shooter. He's okay, but he's not great. His passing ability's normally still there, but there's a lot more turnovers now. He's a step behind, it feels like, oftentimes on offense. He's not blowing by a lot of guys. Yeah. Makes me sad, but maybe I'm the only one that thinks that. Maybe. Hopefully he'll prove me wrong because I never want to see him stop playing. It's just so much fun to watch him play. Plus, I want him to get a ring at some point. Like, goodness gracious. But anyway, so that didn't shock me too much. I did think that they'd put up a little bit more of a fight. They meaning the Suns, but the Nuggets are just unbelievable right now. And then moving on, Heat Knicks. That didn't shock me at all. I didn't think the Knicks were better than the Cavs, and they won. Didn't think they were better than the Heat, and they lost, so not much to say there. I do want to talk about the second round matchup between the Celtics and the Sixers. But in order for me to do that, I do have to go back a little bit because I didn't talk about Celtics Hawks. I tweeted out after game 5 against the Hawks. I think it was game 5. Whatever the one where we had a lead and we blew it and Trae Young hit a dagger 3 on our court to take it to more games. I think that was game 5. I tweeted that I was done. I was done with the Celtics. I can't take watching them anymore. They're the same team they've been for years. Everybody said that this team was different. It's not different. They're the same exact team, same exact guys, same exact problems, just with Malcolm Brogdon in there sometimes. I'm done. Y'all can win, y'all can lose, I don't care. Now, part of me still feels that way. Obviously, I care. I'm a Celtics fan. I'm never going to not care. I want them to win a championship really, really badly. They won one in 2008, and I really don't think I appreciated it as much as I should because I thought that we'd win more, and it just never ended up happening. So like this time I want to see it because I'm really, really going to enjoy it, and I'm really going to appreciate it with all my heart. But this is the same team that it has been for years. They don't want it as bad as the other teams. They don't care as much as the other teams. They let teams back in. They extend series when they shouldn't. And then when their backs are against the wall and they have no other choice, they'll find a way to make you believe again, and then they'll rip your heart out again. And it's just a repeat cycle over and over again until eventually somebody beats them bad enough to where they give up. You don't know when that day comes until it comes, and then you're super disappointed. But, it is what it is. Like, again, for me last year, I picked the Warriors to win in 7 because I thought that, I don't know if you guys remember this, but I picked the first 5 games to a T. I literally picked exactly who would win all the 5 games. And I picked the Celtics to actually fight with their back against the wall at home, and instead they just folded. So that was last year's turning point where they're like, oh, this is when they get beaten so bad that they fold, like this right here. But you don't know that that day comes until it comes. So every time the Celtics get with their backs against the wall, I always sit there and think this might be the day that they fold. This might be it. And so when that game happened, I'm like, you know what? If you're going to fold, just freaking fold. I'm done. And they didn't fold. They barely won game 6, so they moved on. Fine, I'm still done. I don't care. I'll watch the games. I'll hope they win. But if you don't win a championship this year, I'm not going to be shocked, and I'm not going to be like depressed beyond belief like I was last year when they lost. Because I truly believe that last year's team was different, and then they proved to not be. But this year, I found out they're not different early. So I'm like, cool, that's fine. I'm good. So when they face the 76ers now, and Joel Embiid is hurt, and he doesn't play game 1, I'm like, oh, we've got the 76ers number anyway. We're going to ruin them. James Harden, like, what is going on? James Harden is 1,000,000 years old. He weighs 7,000 pounds. He can't blow by anybody except for you, the Boston Celtics, except for you right now. James Harden, fun fact, scored 45 points in game 1. Would you like to know how many times James Harden scored 45 points in a playoff game for the Houston Rockets in his prime when he was an MVP? 0! That's how many. So I'm sitting there as a Celtics fan thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Are you this inept, this uncaring, this just completely like separated from reality that you're going to let a past his prime James Harden rip you to shreds when prime James Harden wasn't ripping anyone to shreds in the playoffs? Is this really what's going to happen right now? And at that point I was like, okay, like I really can't with this team. And yet somehow, some way, down 3-2, despite the fact that they lost game 5 at home again, because James Harden dropped 42 points this time. I haven't gone back to see how many games he scored 42 points in the playoffs as a Houston Rocket, but I'm guessing it ain't many. And I know he didn't do it with the Thunder. So I'm sitting here thinking, we're really going to let a washed James Harden be the reason that we're done. That is where we're going to fold. Are you... If they had lost because of James... Like, if James Harden had come out in Game 6 and dropped 45 again, and we got eliminated in Game 6, I would have just ripped up all my Celtics shirts. I would have taken down the painting back there, and that would have been it. I would have burned my Tatum shirt. I'd have been done. Not because I hate Jason Tatum, although... boy, howdy, he would have been a huge part of that, obviously, with the way he was playing in that series up till Game 7. But, like, it was... I would have been done. I'd have been like, you're never winning a championship. None of these players care. Because it's one thing to let Steph Curry go crazy on you in the finals. He's Steph Curry. That's what he does. Would you have liked to see a little bit more effort to stop him? Sure. But at the end of the day, he is Steph freaking Curry. People think he is the greatest of all time. I do not think that, but he's up there. He's the greatest shooter of all time for sure. He's absolute one-of-one unicorn. No one's been able to do what he's done, and no one's ever going to be able to do it after he's done. For sure. But washed 33-year-old James Harden, whose entire legacy up to this point has been great regular season performer, chokes so hard in the playoffs, it's physically painful to watch. That has been his entire legacy up to this point. And you're not even going to let a 27 or 28-year-old James Harden go crazy on you, which, listen, if that had happened, you know what? Fair. He is fantastic. He is great. He is a first ballot Hall of Fame scorer. Absolutely. Former MVP. I get it. But this version of James Harden, to me, doesn't even belong in the same universe as that James Harden. And I would have been okay if the other James Harden dropped 45 on you and you lost. But this one? No. Not when he's washed and his entire prime he spent choking away playoff games. His entire prime he spent blowing 3-2 leads. His entire prime he spent averaging 25% from three in the fourth quarter in playoff games. His entire prime he spent losing elimination game after elimination game after elimination game. Not that James Harden. Not the washed James Harden. No. I would have not been okay with it. I would have lost my mind. Lost my mind. As you can tell, I'm losing my mind right now. This is what I would have been times 58,207. Because it would have actually lost the dang series. But. The big story would have been Jason Tatum, fake superstar. That's what it would have been. That's what it would have been. Would have been in that parallel universe. But instead, we're living in this one, where for 5 quarters, Jason Tatum was the best basketball player on the planet. He was. He's better than anybody else in the league for those 5 quarters. Or at least anybody in the league left, I should say. Right? And boy, did he save himself. Boy, did he save himself. Because let me tell you, I watched Game 6. I watched every single second of Game 6. And I saw him trip on himself and turn the ball over. I saw him fly out of bounds without getting touched. I saw him miss a layup where there wasn't anybody within 3 to 5 feet of him to block his shot and brick it off the backboard. I saw him miss threes so bad that I knew as soon as it left his hand it had no chance of going in. I saw him brick free throws. I saw him miss mid-rangers, three-pointers, layups, dunks, throw the ball out of bounds, turn the ball over. I was like, this man has gotten to his big moment where he needs to save his team. And not only is he not showing up, he is having the worst performance by an MVP candidate possibly in the history of the playoffs. The only person that I can remember having a worse playoff game up to that point was John Starks in, I don't even remember what year, 89, 92, I don't remember. He shot like 2 for 17, 0 for 9 from 3, missed all his free throws, and the Knicks lost in Game 7 to the Pacers, or whoever it was. That's the only time, and he, not like he was an MVP candidate, he was just a good player. So, MVP candidate? It was unprecedented. I never seen somebody play so bad. I mean, inept, 1 of 14 through 3 quarters, 3 points? Yuck! Are you kidding? Then he made a layup. And then he hit a step-back 3 over Joel Embiid. And even the cynic that I am, even the hardened, battled, depressed, frustrated, desperate Celtics fan that I am, knew that that game was over when he hit that 3. I knew that Jason Tatum was not going to be denied from that moment. Because I knew as soon as he let that one go in, it was over. And then sure enough, he hit 3 more threes, had 16 points in the quarter, saved himself. Now, the important thing is he going to be able to carry it over to Game 7? Yeah, he was. 51 points in Game 7? Are you kidding? The most points ever in a Game 7? Whew, talk about showing up, right? I mean, in 5 quarters, this man went from he needs to be traded, or he needs to be sent to China, or he needs to be sent to whoever, to being the best player in basketball. Now, he's obviously not the best player in basketball, but for those 5 quarters he was, I'll tell you what, it was incredible. Now, so the Celtics win, they find a way, and then it dawns on me, oh, we got to play the Heat again. And I know what you guys are going to say. You're going to say, Tyler, you're only saying this because Game 1's already in the books and the Celtics already lost Game 1. You're already going to say, I know. You're just going to say it. But I promise you this. If you'd have asked me before this series started, Tyler, who you got? I would have said Heat in 5. And every Celtics fan would have screamed at me. Every single one. They would have said, are you kidding? After that performance for Jason Tatum, all that momentum, you think it did? Yes, I do. You know why? Because the Miami Heat want it more, and Jimmy Butler will not be denied this year. If there was ever a year to count out the Heat, it was this one. And Jimmy Butler essentially single-handedly beat the Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games. That's not the Atlanta Hawks. That's not the slow, plodding, inept, and I'm going to only take a shot when there's 1 second on the shot clock left 76ers. That the Celtics just had a hard time beating both those teams, by the way. This is the Milwaukee Bucks, who had the best record in the league, despite not having Chris Middleton for half the season, and a team that defensively, other than Grayson Allen, had no weaknesses. Drew Holiday, first team All-NBA caliber player. Or first team All-Defense, not All-NBA, that's not true. First team All-Defensive caliber player. Brook Lopez, second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Giannis, former Defensive Player of the Year. Chris Middleton has been a former All-Defensive Player. You're talking about a team that has defense on all facets. Perimeter defense. You're not getting past those guys, and even if you do, Brook Lopez and Giannis are waiting for you at the rim. And the Miami Heat, not only, they didn't take 7 games and overpower them at the end with just pure will. They annihilated the Milwaukee Bucks. Ran them off the floor and said, thank you for coming. Favorites who? That's what the Miami Heat just did to the team that not everyone, a lot of people said they're winning the chip this year. This is another Milwaukee Bucks year. This is it. They're the best team in basketball. And Miami Heat dragged them out behind a shed and put a shotgun into their neck. And then they faced a Knicks team who, quite frankly, matches up pretty darn well against the Heat. Mitchell Robinson is a really good center. Not quite as good as Bam, but still pretty good. Julius Randle would give Kevin Love, or at least in theory, a hard time as the 4. Josh Hart is a guy that, he's a really good defender and a solid player at the 3. RJ Barrett is a decent 2. That Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, and I keep saying Cody Martin. It's not Cody Martin. It's the other Martin. Why am I forgetting his name? The other Martin. You know which Martin I'm talking about for the Heat. It's not Cody, it's the other one. I'm so sorry. He's going to score like 90 points next game against Celtics. Watch. Anyway, they're going to have a hard time guarding RJ because he's a solid player. They're going to have their hands full. And then, of course, Jalen Brunson going up against Gabe Vincent and an older, past his prime Kyle Lowry. Yeah, I'm taking Jalen Brunson in that matchup. I'm taking Jimmy Butler over Josh Hart for sure. But hey, at least Josh Hart's got a good wingspan. He's a good defender. He's rock solid. He doesn't let a whole lot of guys by him. I thought the Knicks matched up pretty well against the Heat. Nope, they took them behind the woodshed too. Yeah, I think the Knicks might have won 2 games. But did it ever really feel like the series was in doubt from the very beginning? No. At least not to me. I knew the Heat would win. I didn't think for a second the Knicks had a shot. And then, now they get to face the Celtics. And I would have told you before the series, Heat in 5. Now, I did think the Celtics would win game 1. And then I thought the Heat would just rip us to shreds for 4 straight games. That's what I genuinely believed. I believed that we would win game 1, the Heat would make adjustments in game 2, they'd kill us both games in Miami, and we'd fold in game 5. Because guess what? Guess what game we've lost at home in both series? Game 5. Yeah. So I thought they'd lose again. And they probably still will. If the series goes to 5 games, because who knows, it might be a sweep. But for me, I would have told you before the series, Heat in 5. watching the game last night proved to me that the Celtics not only are not going to win the series, they are the exact same team that has made no adjustments since 3 years ago when they played the Heat. They didn't make any adjustments. They haven't made a single adjustment to the Heat. There's the zone still gives them trouble. They still turn the ball over a million times. Jason Tatum drives right into 3 people in the zone and he gets stripped about 87% of the time when that happens. They miss a bunch of threes. They take a bunch of mid-range shots that aren't any good, and they can't stop anybody. It's the same thing. 3 years ago, the Boston Celtics lost because the Miami Heat could not stop making threes at an above-average rate. Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, and a few other guys just were raining threes. They get an inch of space, whoop, bing, all night long, every game. It was insane. But you know what? You sit there and think, well, you know what? They just got hot. And now you look back, and Tyler Hero's not as good of a three-point shooter as he was that year. And Duncan Robinson definitely is not the same player he was that year. Not even close. He barely plays. So, yeah. You could say, you know what? Maybe they just got really hot. You're willing to deal with that. Last year, what happened pretty much every time the Celtics lost, and they ended up winning the series by that much because Jimmy got so exhausted that he threw up a 3 at the very end to win the game, and it was short because he was exhausted at that point, literally willing the Heat back from down like 18 or whatever the heck it was. But if you look back at all the games they lost, the Celtics won 3 quarters pretty much every time. And then the Heat would beat them so badly in that other 1 quarter that the Celtics wouldn't be able to recover. And why did the Celtics lose game 1 to the Heat? Because the Miami Heat shot 50% from 3, and they beat them so bad in the 3rd quarter that despite the fact the Celtics outscored them in the other 3 quarters, all 3 of them, Celtics got more points in the 1st, more points in the 2nd, and more points in the 4th. But they lost so badly in the 3rd quarter that they lost the game. So not only are you losing like you did 3 years ago, or you're losing like you did last year, you're losing both. You're losing for both reasons. The same one you lost 3 years ago, and the same reason you lost last year. So you guys tell me, what's the definition of insanity again? Even though this isn't the actual real definition of insanity, and I can't stand when people use it, so I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite right now. The widespread definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's not the definition of insanity, by the way, just in case we were wondering. But if that is what the Celtics are doing, why? You didn't learn your lesson 3 years ago that you need, even though they're not on paper phenomenal shooters, you need to get in their space because for some reason when they play you, they shoot 50% from 3 all the time? Or, hey, last year, they beat us really badly in 1 quarter. We can't have those quarters against them this year. They're going to beat us. They're too hot. They're too good. Nope. You just went out there and let the Heat do whatever they want. You let them dictate the pace of the whole game. You let them shoot 72% in the 3rd quarter and miss 1 3-pointer in that whole quarter. You let them score 46 points in the 3rd. On your own home floor, despite the fact that in the 2nd quarter you were up by 15. Are you kidding me? You came out in halftime and just crapped the bed. So when I watched that game and I looked at the final line score and I saw 54% from the field and 50% from 3 for the Heat, and I saw that ticket go across for the box score and it said, 29-24, 38-20. 9 or whatever it was. I don't know. I know they were only up by 9 at halftime, but you guys understand where I'm going with this. 46-20 and then 21-26 or whatever the heck it was. That math doesn't add up, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, when I saw that, I went, okay, they're losing for both reasons, which means they've made no adjustments for 3 years. They have not learned a single lesson from playing the Heat in the last 3 years. Whereas the Heat have learned exactly what they're supposed to do to play the Celtics. They're doing the exact same thing. They know exactly their weaknesses, and they're going to exploit them. And the Miami Heat, if you give them a millimeter to breathe, they will tear your heart out. They are not like the 76ers, and they are not like the Hawks. The 76ers had an entire culture of failure going against them in Game 7. James Harden's ineptitude in the playoffs. Doc Rivers blowing more 3-2 leads than anybody in history of coaching, in the NBA anyway. 10 losses now in Game 7s, despite the fact that no other coach has even half that. Actually, I think there might be some that have had 5. So exactly half that. But you get my point. They had an entire culture of failure going against them. The Heat don't have that culture of failure. They have the opposite. They have a culture in which if you give them an inch, they will rip out your soul. The Milwaukee Bucks quite literally gave them just a little bit of space. And the Miami Heat said, yeah, you're dead. And they killed their entire family. There is no Milwaukee Bucks left. They got wiped off the face of the earth. And then poor Knicks just had no chance from the beginning. I don't even think the Knicks thought they had a chance to win that series. It literally, to me, I couldn't even watch the games after a little while. After like 3 or 4 games, I'm like, I can't even watch this. Like, the only one out there who felt like he gave a crap was Jalen Brunson. And so you just feel bad for the guy. You just feel like he's out there by himself. And now the Celtics go up against the Heat, who they face now 3 times in the last 4 years in the Eastern Conference Finals. And it's the same exact problems. They come out lackluster in the third quarter. They get the brakes beaten off of them. They lose the game that they shouldn't have. Now they're scrambling. I'm sure they're going to win game 2 because that's the pattern. They'll come out desperate. They'll probably win. But I'll tell you what. After the Miami Heat taste a little bit of blood, they're going to get desperate. And the Celtics, just like they always do when they win a game in the playoffs, I feel better now. Like, and then it's going to be over before you know it, and the Heat are going to be moving on to the NBA Finals. And I'm going to sit here and say, did we really just let Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, a 98-year-old Kevin Love, Bam Adebayo, who's not a better center than any of the other centers, well, maybe he's better than Robert Williams. I'll give him that at least, but he wasn't better than Joel Embiid. He's not better than Jokic. He's not better than Davis. Like, you're going to really let him, Jimmy Butler, and a bunch of no-names go to the finals again. When you've got, according to the NBA, because guess what? Jaylen Brown made second-team All-NBA. I don't know if you realize that. That means that you have not one top 5 player in the NBA, not one top 10 player in the NBA. You have 2 now. That's what now, it's obviously not perfect. It doesn't exactly mean top 10, but you can make the argument now. He was a second-team All-NBA, which means he was one of the 10 best players in the NBA, Jaylen Brown. And Jason Tatum obviously made first team, so that means you got 2 of the top 10 players in the NBA. Let me ask you this. Do the Heat have 2 of the top 10 players in the NBA? Nope. Do they have 2 of the top 20 players in the NBA? Nope. Do they have 2 of the top 40? Maybe. Maybe. You have top 5 player, top 10 player, 6th man of the year, guy who was in the running for defensive player of the year last year, guy who won defensive player of the year last year, Derek White, who put up like 18 points a night this year, and a guy who is quote-unquote the Joel Embiid stopper in Al Horford, and you're getting your brakes beaten by Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and a bunch of their undrafted friends. It is so frustrating. But, as I said, if you'd asked me at the beginning, I knew this was going to happen, so I don't know why I'm letting it get me frustrated. I don't know why I'm surprised. I really shouldn't be. But, yeah, I don't know what else to say, guys. So, I'm going to wrap it up here. Hopefully you guys enjoy. It's obviously a lot longer than usual, but I'm very happy I was able to do it for you guys. I wanted to get you guys a little bit more this time, and I didn't have a crazy big plan or anything, just because it's been a few weeks. So, I'm covered in sweat. I got myself pretty worked up there, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. Thank you guys so very much for watching. I love all of you, and I will see you next time.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.